What's going on, ladies and gents? Guess who's back? What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Off the Beaten Path vlog. I'm your host, Dion. So, a lot has happened since the last time I posted, and I'd love to talk about it, but I'm not gonna. I have a very specific topic I want to talk about today, and I don't want to spend a lot of time to talk about it, so let's just jump right into it. So someone sent me a video today, and it was a video of a woman named Candace Owens. If you're not familiar with Candace Owens, she's a YouTuber, blogger, public speaker. She's a conservative. She's black, she's pretty, and she espouses conservatism and conservative values to black American families. So the video that was sent to me was called The Declaration. It was part of her red, black pill series or whatever she calls it. Well, the person asked me, is this how all black people feel about this issue? So first things first, watch the video so you know exactly what I'm talking about. It would take me hours to pull this thing apart. So I'm just gonna try to hit a few of the points and kind of offer an alternative perspective to the conservative drivel that she offers. So allow me to apologize beforehand. I'm actually using handwritten notes that I made. I watched the video earlier. I actually watched it a couple times, and oh gosh, there's so much to dig into. So first things first, she talks about Colin Kaepernick. This is kind of the whole point of the video. First things, I think Colin Kaepernick is brave. I think that he bravely knelt down to protest the systemic racism that was manifesting itself in the repeated shootings of black men and women, often unarmed and actually often unable to protect themselves. That was an act of bravery, and he put his career on the line. He also helped to elevate a conversation that wasn't happening as greatly as it did after his actions. And he's being blackballed by the NFL for doing so. He's lost his job, and he's never going to play in the NFL again because he ruffled feathers and he made people uncomfortable. That's important. How the fuck did we get from talking about Colin Kaepernick to the beaches of Normandy? This is a logical fallacy in action. She takes two things that seem like they relate to each other, they absolutely don't, and she tries to compare them to bolster her argument. I'm a veteran. I spent time in Afghanistan. I don't necessarily think that makes me brave, but a lot of people do. I wouldn't compare that to someone in 2017 who's standing up for a social justice issue. They have nothing in common. Those are not comparable things. They're in completely different contexts. Lady, get it together. I will say that he used his power and position to create a widespread conversation, and that wasn't happening otherwise. And just so we throw it out there, Colin Kaepernick's protest was not about a flag. It was not about an anthem. It was about the systemic racism and about mistreatment and lack of equal protection in the law and equal access of resources for black Americans. And that's a conversation that needs to be had, especially after events like Charlottesville. Next, Candace offers a popular conservative perspective, at least in my opinion, that every time a black man complains about something, he's throwing a tantrum. This is in the same way that then they want to next dictate to us exactly how we're allowed to express ourselves in public discourse. Things like, oh, you want to march in the streets? No, you can't protest like that. And then, oh, you want to kneel during the national anthem? Oh no, you can't protest like that. If we look back to history, we're just going to sit at the lunch counter to protest. Oh no, you can't protest like that. So how exactly can we protest, Candace? When can we protest? Where? What she's actually trying to say, and what conservatives often want to say, is actually, y'all shouldn't be protesting at all. You should be happy with what you have. You don't have as much as me, but you should be happy with what you have. So then she goes on to talk about Independence Day and Thanksgiving. Drivel. Let's move on. Next, Candace goes on to talk about Colin Kaepernick's support of Meek Mill. I don't know much about Meek Mill. I'm not a fan. I couldn't name a song. I couldn't point him out if he was staying on the corner. But I did go up and look at the story. So I think Jay-Z kind of summed this up best recently at a performance of his for his 444 tour. He said, and I quote, "I got to say something about a young man named Meek Mill. He caught a charge. He was about 19. He's 30 now. He's been on probation 11 years. Fucking 11 years. Now he got to do 2 to 4 years because he got arrested being on a bike popping a fucking willy." So I read this story. Yes, Meek Mill was arrested for a crime previously. They said that the normal probationary period for said crime was 5 years, but the judge and the prosecutor took special notice of his case because of his social status, and they extended his probationary period to 10 years. He was offered a heavy-handed punishment for a rather ordinary crime. He was punished harder than other defendants. So while undergoing his extended probationary period, he does have probation violations. The most recent which was he was riding a dirt bike, and I suppose he was pulled over and he was popping a wheelie, which is against law, and he was arrested, which was a violation of his probation. So now he's being offered 2 to 4 years in prison. And I think T.I. kind of like zeroed in on this when he commented on Instagram. He said, when you realize Meek got more jail time for riding a dirt bike than a cop would for shooting an unarmed African American. Is that equal protection under the law? And I think that's what Colin Kaepernick is concerned with. Breaking the law is illegal, but Meek Mill is in jail because he was arguably penalized harsher than a white defendant or a defendant who wasn't famous. And it was also noted that his case garnered special interest by prosecutors because of his social status. That is what we call unequal protection under the law. Now, let me remind you that not too long ago, a young man by the name of Brock Turner got only 6 months for being convicted of sexually assaulting a woman. 6 months for rape. But the crazy train moves on, as she goes on to talk about Jay-Z and his support of Hillary and Bill Clinton. So, Jay-Z supported Hillary Clinton because the alternative candidate was Donald Trump, and we all see how that's working out for us. He may not agree with all of her policies, he may not have agreed with the policies of her husband, but when compared to Donald Trump, he was willing to support her because Donald Trump was a bad candidate, and he is resulting in being a bad president. Also, point of order, that last statement was an opinion. Now, Candace and I can partially agree that police brutality is not the only issue facing black communities. However, let's keep in mind, especially here in Chicago, as has happened in other American cities, the Department of Justice came in and stated after an investigation that the Chicago Police Department has been violating the civil rights of Chicago citizens, mainly black and brown ones, for decades. So for those of you who wonder why a black man or a young black man might see police and automatically run, is because they knew that perhaps an unprovoked ass whipping was coming along with that. In addition, looming over the city is the shadow of a man named John Burge. If you're not familiar with him, look him up. John Burge was a police commander here in Chicago. And let me just make sure I get this right. He tortured more than 200 suspects from 1972 to 1991 to force confessions. Confessions in cases that many of them weren't even connected to. He wasn't convicted for torturing 200 people. He was convicted for perjury. He did 4 years in prison and came out with a full pension from the city of Chicago. Is that what we call equal protection under the law? So other issues facing the black community. Well, actually the other day, a group of middle schools were educating me about racial restrictive covenants. So what is a racial restrictive covenant? You ask. They refer to contractual agreements that prohibit the purchase, lease, or occupation of a piece of property by a particular group of people, usually African Americans. So here's how this worked out in Chicago. Realtors and neighborhoods would make agreements, and banks, we're not going to give loans to black people to move into these communities so that they stay nice. And if those people happen to sneak in, the residents would make sure that they'd quickly move out. So once we've isolated the black people to one part of the city, we do something called redlining. We basically lower the property value of the neighborhood because now it's bad. And once we've done that, we can deny services directly or indirectly, making sure I get this right, to residents of that area based on their racial ethnic composition. What were some of those services that we're denying them? Well, you're not going to get home loans to improve your homes. You're not going to get business loans. Oh no, not in that area. And then we can actually jack up the insurance of your bad neighborhood and make you pay more for insurance than your white counterparts across town. You want a mental health facility in your neighborhood? Mm-mm. You want better schools in your neighborhood? Mm-mm. You want supermarkets? Oh no. Starbucks? We would deny them everything. So you've denied resources, education, jobs, any kind of economic development. What does that neighborhood begin to look like? What happens there? Now, I refer to these things in a historic context, but let me assure you, these things still happen today. You can still find news articles about redlining and restrictive covenants as recent as 2016. They still happen. So the other things, the other problems facing the black community, closing schools, redlining, restrictive covenants, lack of educational resources, lack of mental health and drug rehab facilities, lack of jobs, lack of any other resource that you would get in nicer neighborhoods. Those are a lot of problems. That is what we call systemic racism. And those are the difficulties that face black communities all across America. Next, Candace goes on to talk about abortions. So please excuse me if I read from my notes, but I just want to make sure that I get my thoughts accurate as I had them, as I wrote them. So Candace, her facts aren't racist, but they ignore the social conditions that created them. Why are blacks living in depressed communities? Because they got no support from their cities or their governments or their government officials. They were abused and abandoned. Right now in America, we have young black men in prison for selling weed, while we have rich white men getting richer off of growing and selling weed. Isn't that strange? Is that equality? Opinion alert. Also, President Barack Obama's presidency was stymied by Mitch the Bitch McConnell and Paul Ryan because he was black. And Mitch McConnell makes comment in his book several times of the fact that President Barack Obama would talk down to me. He was the president. You're an asshole. He's smarter than you. Ooh, Mitch, I bet that makes you so mad. Mitch McConnell doesn't like uppity blacks. He doesn't like black men who are smarter than them. That's pretty obvious from his book. Die mad about it. And to close on this video, the declaration, Candace, it's not your intelligence. Your intelligence doesn't make you an Uncle Tom. I'm reading from my notes. Your self-hatred does. Back in the slave days, there were always slaves who would attempt to thwart escapes of uprisings. Progress. To curry favor with the master, that's you. I'm not going to use cliche names on you. I'm just going to say that, hey, you have your perspective. Unfortunately, it's not based in reality or facts. You don't use facts. You use logical fallacies and straw man arguments and weird comparisons and, oh, look, there goes a fly flying above our heads. Empirical evidence is what you need. In history, you need a very deep, long history lesson. I hope you get it. Also, some fun facts I came across while researching the different topics that we talked about in this video. Restrictive covenants were outlawed in 1948. Brown versus Board of Education, which outlawed segregated public education, that went down in 1954. The Civil Rights Acts of 1964 ended all state and local laws requiring segregation. The first known African American to get a college degree was in 1823, and his name was Alexander Lucius Twilight. Did a black man getting a college degree in racism in 1823? No. Did the Civil Rights Act of 1964 end racism in our country? No. Did getting our first black president end racism in our country? No. So when this video was first sent to me, I responded very cursorily to the person who sent it. And this was the response I got back. I said basically that this is the same crap that the Tea Party and Donald Trump espouses, and hey, look up some stuff and get back to me. But the person said, well, I guess I totally missed the Trump connection. To me, this was more of a call to get a grip. Take responsibility for your own house. Think the blacks in Alabama got over the sex and dating young girls and got to economic issues. That got the vote for Dems. Same old vote buying. You know my background is Irish. We came with nothing. We worked, went to school, and made a life here without any help from government. Even though we experienced discrimination, we served in all wars and honored this country. And one of us even became a president. You're too young to remember what a big deal that was. So my question is really, what's the deal? What the heck do you think the black population needs? More than what has been done, that is. At some point, you must take responsibility for your own direction. It is the old give a fish or teach a person to fish. Or pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, let me just hit some of these points real quick. I think the blacks in Alabama got over the sex and dating young girls. No, that's absolutely false. The exit polls all said that the comments given were basically that this was a vote of character. And most of the black respondents voted for Jones because they said that Moore had no character. He was notorious and he had just displayed a despicable character. And so, had nothing to do with economic issues, and that's not vote buying. That's just reviling someone who's an awful person, which the Republican Party was unwilling to do. And so from there, yes, the Irish American argument. This is an argument that racists use very often, and I've encountered many times. So let's just go ahead and hit these points. We came with nothing. We worked jobs that were not offered to African Americans, and you also came here of your own free will. You were never slaves or enslaved. You went to school that blacks were never allowed to go to, and you made a life here without much any help from government. But oddly enough, Irish Americans took a lot of municipal jobs as either police or firemen. So you actually became a part of the government, and you were offered a bevy of many other things that I won't go into right now. And one thing to remember is that while the Irish were discriminated against in this country, very much so, they were still white, and they were actually still able to join the club. And how were the Irish able to just jump in with their other white brethren? Well, they became anti-abolitionists, and they turned and said, well, let's look at those people over there. To get into the great white club, they became racists. Yeah. I don't even know what else to say about that. Other than this, what do black people need? Access to resources, not to be denied things because of the color of their skin, to not be ignored by their government or their politicians, not to be shot just because they're buying a soda or an orange juice or walking down the street. You know, those basic rights that Americans are supposed to be receiving. If you give that to any black person, I think they'll do with it what any white person would. Because we're not different. Race is a social construct. It's made up. It has no biological or medical bearing. Race doesn't exist. The color of your skin is based on how far away you were from the equator, or how far away your ancestors were. That's it. There's only one race in this world. It's the human race. Not in America, because we know that race actually exists and it has consequences and people die every day because of it. So what do black people need? To be treated like humans by everyone else. If we got that, we'd have the equality that we asked for. The problem, people like Candace Owens, people like you, who propagate false narratives. Fix it. Just fix it. So that's it. I'm sorry I spent so much time on this, but I needed to dive deeper, but I don't want to waste your time. But please comment below. Let me know what you think. What should I have mentioned? What did I miss? What did I get right? I would love to hear conversation around this. Also, check me out on Facebook. Check me out on Instagram. Check me out on Twitter. You can also check out my blog, Reflections of a Chicago Life. Thank you guys for watching.